Just imagine this. It's 2016, it's raining outside, you just come back home after picking up a physical copy of Dark Souls 3 for your PS4. You put the disc in, dim the lights, sit down with the controller, and prepare yourself for what people keep calling the ultimate Souls experience. For a moment, it feels perfect. Quiet room, cozy setup, a brand new game waiting to begin. Then, about 30 minutes later, the experience changes completely. You die, then you die again and again and again. The cozy atmosphere slowly turns into frustration, confusion, and a quick search on Reddit that probably reads something like, "Why is this game so hard?" For a lot of people, that was the first impression of Dark Souls 3. Not just that game, but the entire Soulsborne genre. Back then, these games had a reputation. They were difficult, mysterious, and a little intimidating. But if you stayed with them long enough, something clicked. The system started to make sense. The bosses that once felt impossible slowly became manageable, and that feeling of finally understanding the pattern of the game was what made people fall in love with this genre. In 2022, From Software released Elden Ring, and suddenly the entire gaming world was talking about Souls games again. This time on a much larger scale because the idea of an open world Souls game was exciting. A huge fantasy world, basically Dark Souls but open world, complete freedom in how you play, countless builds to experiment with, and a massive map to explore. For many people, it felt like the ultimate evolution of the formula. Naturally, most of the attention shifted there. New players entered the genre through Elden Ring, and older games like Dark Souls 3 slowly faded into the background. They were still respected, of course, but they weren't the main conversation anymore. And that's where my experience starts. By the time I played Dark Souls 3, which is pretty recently, I had already experienced several Soulsborne and Souls-like games. I had played Sekiro, Elden Ring, Lies of P, and a few others. Bloodborne is still sitting in my backlog for now, mostly because of performance issues on the PS5 and the FPS, but it's definitely next on the list. When I told a few friends I was finally going to try Dark Souls 3, a surprising number of them said the same thing, that it might actually be the most balanced From Software game, and in some cases even better than Elden Ring. At the time, I did not believe that because Elden Ring felt like the ultimate version of the formula, a huge open world, endless possibilities, builds, and a scale that previously games never attempted. It was hard to imagine that a more linear game from 2016 could compete with that. And the reasons for that comes down to 4 things. The first reason is simply the difference between open world design and a more focused experience. Elden Ring is enormous. Its world is built around exploration, and there's always another direction you can travel. That freedom is impressive, and I understand why people enjoy it. But for me personally, that scale sometimes made the experience feel unfocused. I spent a surprising amount of time trying to figure out where to go next. At times, it felt like I was jumping between gameplay and YouTube guides just to understand how to progress. It literally felt like YouTube Simulator. Dark Souls 3, on the other hand, felt more direct. The game moves you from one carefully designed area to the next. It does not remove exploration entirely, but it keeps the experience structured. Because of that, the pacing feels much tighter, and even if I have to go to YouTube, it's pretty direct. Instead of wandering across a massive world with a horse, you're constantly moving towards the next meaningful encounter. The second reason is the level design. Dark Souls 3 does receive criticism for being more linear than the earlier Souls games, and that criticism is fair to some degree. But what stood out to me is how distinct each area feels and how it rewards exploration. Every location has its own identity. The environments change in tone, structure, and atmosphere. Some areas focus on vertical exploration, others on careful navigation through dangerous terrain, and some simply impress you visually the moment you arrive. You're drawn back and you actually look at the scenery. There were multiple moments where I opened a door, saw the next area, and paused for a few seconds just to take it all in. For a game released in 2016, that level of atmosphere still feels remarkable. Elden Ring offers incredible variety in its world as well, but because the map is so large, some areas started to blend together for me after a while, and it was just repetitive. The scale is impressive, but the smaller, more curated spaces of Dark Souls 3 ended up feeling more memorable for me. The third reason is the bosses. Both games have excellent boss fights, but the way they are presented feels different. Because Elden Ring is so large, you encounter many bosses throughout the game, and some of them appear in slightly altered forms later on. In Dark Souls 3, there are similar cases, but the major bosses feel more deliberate. Each one has a strong identity, a memorable arena, and a clear rhythm to the fight. The Nameless King, for example, top 5 bosses of all time for me easily, stood out immediately. The atmosphere, the challenge, and the pacing of that fight made it one of the most memorable Souls bosses I've ever played. Like, it was so cool. Another thing that I noticed is that Dark Souls 3 bosses tend to give clearer windows for attacks. Once you understand their patterns, the fight starts to feel like a rhythm. In comparison, some Elden Ring encounters feel more chaotic, where I spent long stretches simply dodging and waiting for an opening. While I do appreciate bosses like Millennia and Bale, both approaches work, but the consistency of Dark Souls 3 bosses left a stronger and memorable impression on me. The final reason is the overall player experience, especially for new players. Souls games can be intimidating, and first time when someone picks it up and chooses to play often shapes how they see the entire game. That's why I think starting with a more focused experience can be helpful. Dark Souls 3 introduces the mechanics of the genre in a controlled way, and the progression feels clear. The difficulty gradually increases and the player has time to understand how the systems work. Elden Ring gives players far more freedom, which is exciting, but that same freedom can also feel overwhelming if you're completely new to the genre. Because of that, if someone asked me where to begin with Souls game, I would probably recommend Dark Souls 3 first. In conclusion, after finishing both games, I think it's important to say that they both are excellent in their own ways. Elden Ring is ambitious, massive, and incredibly influential. It pushed the genre into new territory and introduced Souls games to a much larger audience. Dark Souls 3, however, offers something slightly different. It's more focused, more contained, and in many ways more consistent from beginning to end. For me personally, that made the experience more enjoyable. And that's really the main point of this video. Not that one game is objectively better than the other, but that sometimes the smaller, more focused experience can leave a stronger impression. Of course, if you've played both, you might feel completely differently, and that part is what makes these games interesting to talk about. But if someone asked me today which one I would recommend to play first, my answer would be Dark Souls 3. This has been The Save Room. If you enjoyed this video, feel free to subscribe for more calm gaming discussions like this. And if you've played both games, I'd genuinely like you to know which one you prefer. Until next time, don't forget to save your game.